Number 3, the appraiser prepares the value finding appraisal report. The purpose of the value finding appraisal report is to state and document the unit of value for the whole property as a vacant site before the taking, ignoring project influence. Also, the appraiser has to state and document the component parts of the fair market value estimate, also known as FMVE, demonstrate compliance to USPAP, to 49 CFR Part 24, and to the Ohio Administrative Code Section 5501 2-506. So to prepare the value finding appraisal report, the appraiser must review the right-of-way plans and the construction plans to assess the effect of the taking on the residue property and extend an invitation to the owner to accompany the appraiser during the appraiser's inspection of the property. It's a requirement of code. Then the appraiser will inspect the property with the owner. The appraiser is then going to determine what the whole property is before the taking. The appraiser is going to determine the highest and best use of that whole property. And then the estimated value in that value finding appraisal report will be the unit of value for the whole property as a vacant site. That's going to assume the property was vacant. It's going to ignore all improvements that are outside the take area, and it's going to be based on the site's highest and best use. It will also ignore project influence. And this analysis assumes that the valuation problem is determined to be uncomplicated, there can be no damages to the residue, and that the unit value of the whole property as a vacant site is the same as the unit value of the residue site. The unit value of the whole site as vacant is then allocated to the land component of the part taken. So here's an example. Unit value of the whole, let's assume it's $20,000 an acre. Let's assume the part taken was 2.365 acres and that it was taken in WD, which means it's a fee simple acquisition, reserving to the residue the right of reasonable access. So the fair market value estimate for the land taken is the take area, 2.365 acres, times the unit value of the whole site as vacant, $20,000 an acre, equals compensation for the land only taken of $47,300. The compensation for improvements taken that are part of the part taken is considered next. Compensation for site improvements within the take is always based on their contributory value to the whole property. If the site improvement doesn't contribute, then it has really no value, and it's itemized as $1 in the compensation estimate to recognize that it's in the take area. So assume that we have a 900-foot long, 4-foot high chain link fence that's taken. It's in good condition. Depreciation is estimated at 10%, and that fence contributes to the highest and best use of the property because it holds back livestock and also acts as a security buffer to the property. Assume that the estimated cost new to replace that fence is $25 a lineal foot, and that cost was obtained from a fencing contractor who specializes in fencing costs. The estimated cost to replace that fencing from that contractor is $25 a lineal foot. So the fair market value for site improvements taken is 900 lineal feet of fencing taken at $25 a lineal foot. It's 10% depreciated, which means it retains 90% of its value. And so that is multiplied with the other numbers to give us an indicated value for the fencing taken of $20,250. Also, nominal cost to cure can be considered as part of the cost compensation estimate. Cost to cure is a monetary amount that offsets or reduces or eliminates a condition that may damage the residue property. In the previous slide, 900 lineal feet of fencing was taken. That means the residue has no fencing. And that fencing held back livestock from wandering into the road. Now that the fencing is gone, the livestock won't stay on the residue property, and that could affect the highest and best use of the residue. This condition can be cured by providing the owner with compensation to replace the fencing that was taken. So before the take, the owner had 900 lineal feet of fencing and it suffered a 10% depreciation. So the owner was paid $20,250 for this depreciated fence. So now a new fence has to be installed on the residue to replace the old fence. And the owner's already been paid 90% of the cost for a new fence. So what's left to be paid for a cure is 10%. And this will provide the owner with adequate funds to install a new fence at a cost of $25 a lineal foot. And this will put the owner back into a situation of having a fence on the property both before and after the taking. So the cost new for a fence at $25 was $22,500. In the part taken, we paid $20,250. And so that difference is $2,250, which will give the owner all of the $22,500 to reinstall the fence on the residue property as the cost of cure. Finally, compensation for temporary construction easements also be considered in the value finding appraisal report. Temporary construction easement is of short duration, needed only for the construction phase of the project. When the project is done, there's no need for the temporary easement. The temporary easement does not affect the property before the taking. It affects the residue property. So the analysis to estimate compensation for a T is based on the residue property. And the appraisal scoping checklist acknowledge that the takings haven't adversely affected the residue. All parties agree to that. Therefore, it's implied that the unit value for the residue is the same as the property before the taking. Compensation is generally the land rent for the area encumbered by the temporary construction easement for the duration of the temporary. And land rent is based on the unit value for the residue site, which is allocated to the temporary construction area. Here's an illustration. That white square illustrates the whole property before the taking. That yellow is the road. So the whole is 10 acres, and let's assume it's valued at $20,000 an acre. That blue is a 1 acre WD take. The area between the blue and that red dotted line is a temporary easement. Let's assume it's also 1 acre in size. So to estimate compensation for the blue area, the WD, is 1 acre. The whole was valued at $20,000 an acre. We're allocating to the part taken, so that is $20,000 for compensation for the blue area. That black outline represents the residue property. And you can see that the T taking is on the residue property. The residue now contains 19 acres. It's not damaged by the takings and has the same unit value as the whole. So the T affects the residue. Let's assume the T is for 6 months. So compensation is the land rental of the 1 acre T parcel for 6 months. And we're going to use the income approach to estimate rent, and it's called IRV, I-R-V, where income equals rate times value. Value is the value of the residue site allocated to the T encumbered area. Rate is the capitalization rate appropriate for the land. And income is the land rental during the T area for its duration. So in this example, the unit value for the 1 acre T take is $20,000. We're going to assume that the capitalization rate appropriate for the land is 8%. When we multiply those two together, we're going to get an annual rental amount of $1,600. And finally, we're going to multiply that by 6 months, which is 50% of a year, which gives us an estimated compensation amount for the temporary construction easement of $800. All right, it's now time for knowledge check 2.